responsibility. If you come in contact with other human beings in your work life, you are a leader.
Jen,
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us today. Super excited, and
Abs-
congratulations in advance of the new book. That's
Thank you.
outstanding.
I have my author's copy right here, which is pretty amazing to hold it in my hand.
I can only imagine all the work that goes into it to finally see it in print. It's like one thing to get the copy, electronically, but to actually have it, it's got to feel pretty good.
It feels amazing and it makes it feel real. You're like, oh wow, I did this. Like I did this.
It's
So
really happening. Well, congratulations. It's super
thank you.
exciting. And
Thank you.
I mean, and I want everyone who watches this and everyone who watches to tell your friends to go get this book because it's so amazing and it's so important about what you're talking about. So, all right, I can't do it justice, but I think it's just amazing though that it goes beyond what we always talk about from a well-being standpoint. The headlines are always get more sleep or get the appropriate sleep, exercise, eat better, but it's about relationships. So, anyways, that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to turn it over to you. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe the impetus for writing the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the Chief Wellbeing Officer at Deloitte. I've been with Deloitte for 20 years, and I've been in my role as a Chief Wellbeing Officer for about 5.5 years. And there's a long story about how I became the Chief Wellbeing Officer, which I'm happy to get into if you want to. But the impetus for writing the book was really actually my co-author and I didn't really plan to write a book together, but we gave a presentation together at the Work Human Conference in 2019. And after that presentation, we were approached by a publisher that said, this is a great topic. Have you guys thought about writing a book? And we were like, no, not really. And we kind of, went back to our lives and work. And she reached out to us a few months later and she's like, I really think you should write this book. And we were like, okay, this is the universe kind of conspiring to tell us that we needed to write this book. Now, fast forward, it took us a little while to get our stuff together to actually write it. Started writing it about 3 months prior to like going into quarantine, the pandemic hitting. And it was such a fascinating time to be writing a book about relationships at work, because a lot of what we talk about in the book is the impact that technology has had on our relationships, and a lot
Sure.
of recommendations for how we aren't technology haters, but how we can start to use technology to really augment our humanity as
Right.
opposed to replace or detract from our humanity in the workplace, because technology, it's here to stay, right? And we've adopted and adopted and adopted technology into every aspect of our life, but we haven't adapted to it as quickly as we've adopted it, right? And so we're
Right.
starting to see, and I think we've all felt it in some way, right? The loss of kind of human connection and having to use technology to be connected to those that we care about and those that we love for the past 15 months or so. So we wrote this in the middle of a pandemic. So it was a fascinating time to be writing about this topic.
Unbelievable time.
Yeah. So that's and really, you're right. When we talk about well-being, we don't really talk about relationships as much, but we should, because
Right.
human beings are meant to connect. Like that's who we are at our core, is to connect with other human beings. And it's not just about our relationship with other human beings. It's about our relationship with ourselves. It's about our relationship with our environment, with our physical environment, our virtual environment, the world we live in. So there's all kinds of different relationships that we talk about and kind of decode in the book, to help people really enhance their well-being and their work life.
That's what's incredibly important. And I think just one thing I'll build on from what you said is what I've come to appreciate is how important relationships are. And we've seen that through COVID and through the pandemic of being quarantined. And we know the human animal bond is incredibly strong. We almost didn't know how strong it was. In last year, let alone, just over 11 million households adopted a pet. So that need for companionship is incredibly important. And it's just amazing when we've been, now personally, like when I've been reconnected with a friend that I haven't seen in a long time because I haven't been able to travel, and his traveling's been able to open up and being able to do it in a safe way, how important that is. So relationships in the workplace are incredibly important. We spend so much time with our coworkers, and it's just important. So I would love to learn from you and listen to what you can describe. Like when we're going to have, we have over 19,000 associates, I'm so appreciative of how many of our associates join now, and then we'll watch once we post this, and we'll connect to thousands of our associates. So from a leadership standpoint, all the leaders in our practice, I would just really love to understand, like, what is it that a leader can do to create the right conditions? And I ask it that way because often companies can create a standardized program, but it's about the leader making sure that they're doing the proper role modeling, and then talking with the employees or associates on how do we take advantage of this, or how do we get the benefit of it. So maybe can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the way that we talk about it in the book and kind of broader at Deloitte, you're absolutely right. There's kind of the organizational construct and structure and what leaders of the at the top of the house of the organization can do. And that's really important to kind of set the tone and the context. But where the kind of money really is at the team level. So there's organization, there's team, and there's individuals. And individuals tend to have, and I know you and I are probably going to talk about this, kind of tend to have a lot more power than they often believe that they
Yes.
ask for what they need and set the boundaries that they have. And so you're right, the team leader does play a significant role in that, right? And that's the most significant. The team is the most significant area for people, because we know that the people that impact our
I
well-being,
love that.
yeah, the people that impact our well-being the most are the people that we spend the majority of our time with. And so for those
Yes.
that are spending 8, 9, 10 hours a day working, we're probably spending more time often with the people that we work with than we are with the people that we live with.
Yes.
Hopefully some of that time we're sleeping when we're at home, right? And so if you're not creating that culture and environment where people feel like they can be open and authentic and ask for what they need, then it's a real missed opportunity. So what can leaders do? And when I define leaders, it's leaders of all kinds, right? I mean, you can be a people leader and a leader of a team, but our colleagues are leaders of different initiatives. I
I
kind of
love
define,
that.
right? Like we all have some responsibility. If you come in contact with other human beings in your work life, you are a leader.
I love that. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I love that because too often we don't take that personal responsibility, and we
Yeah,
just want to push it off on somebody else. And I understand sometimes we may not experience the right culture from our leader, but we
right.
have the responsibility to impact across to our peer group and impact those that we lead. So I love it. I love it.
We
Keep going,
do.
keep going. This is
We
great.
are all responsible for the culture that we want to create. So as a leader, be vulnerable, right? Like that's going to look different for every single person. We
Love
all
it.
have a different comfort level. That doesn't mean coming to work and, spilling every gory detail of your life, right? But, sharing what's going on. This is what I did this weekend. This is what I'm struggling with. These are some strategies
Mm,
that that are working for me. It's really about being human, right? And
right, right,
having conversations and showing a little bit of humanity. Look, we all struggle, we all have things that we're dealing with. It's okay to bring emotion into the workplace. As a matter of fact, you need to bring emotion into the workplace. Telling
right.
to kind of check their emotions at the door, which is very old school thinking. Just it's not real, like it doesn't work. That's like
It
basically
doesn't
saying
work.
don't be human, right? Like humans
Right.
are made up of emotions, right? And so sharing a little bit of yourself and being human, and then letting people know, like, I'm here if you want to talk, if if they're like, just kind of keeping that door open for people and constantly kind of reminding them. But we know that, like, leaders need to walk the talk, right? You can't just say that that I believe this. You actually really do need to show it. And I'll give you an example in my own life. I used to tell my team, like, hey, when you take vacation, you do not need to check email. Absolutely, I want you to disconnect. But by the way, when I take vacation, I'm going to check email, just because I
Oh,
don't
that's
like
good.
I don't like to come back to having so many emails, and not, but it's not going to affect me, right? Like, and that was ridiculous, right? I mean, that much later on, I learned, like, okay, not only am I sending a mixed signal to my team by telling them you don't have to, but I'm going to do it. Because what that really says is you don't have to, but if you want to one day be in my role, you really do have to.
Right.
Right? So
That's a powerful example.
yeah, you're sending them. And oh, by the way, I shouldn't be checking email on vacation. I should be on vacation, and we should all give ourselves permission to disconnect. And when leaders role model that behavior, it gives everybody else permission to do the same thing. And so you really do need to kind of decide what's comfortable for you and what's right for you, and put yourself out there, be vulnerable, share and role model, that behavior, so that you create, the comfort and the permission for other people to do the same.
I love that. That's a great example around vulnerability and around walking the talk.
Yeah.
And it's really, I want every leader to think about what's the one thing that you're going to do. And when you do it, before you do it, think about what are you going to say, but then how do your actions actually match that? Because I mean, I hear that all the time from so many people of you should do X, or I believe in X. And then when you see them do it, it's Y. And it's not with like malicious intent. But it's also, I don't think we understand the shadow that we cast, because we cast such an enormous shadow. And I was reading something the last couple of weeks that talked a lot about how there's a big disconnect. We say one thing, and yet organizations tend to do something inconsistent with what they say. That's powerful.
Yeah,
So
it's really interesting. I mean, the example about the email, my team was the one that called me out on it. They were like, okay, like you tell us. So we're just going to, I mean, they kind of came up with this whole scheme in the background. Like, next time you go on vacation, we're just not going to send you any, like, we're going to hold everything back. So you're
that
not
is great.
to reply, right? And then they kind of came to me with it, and they're just like, yeah, you can't tell us to do one thing and not do it yourself. And so, that's psychological safety, right? They had the courage and the comfort to say, like, hey, no, like, you said one thing and you're doing another, so what do you actually mean?
That's awesome. Well, I think that actually leads me to my next question then. So as an organization, it's one thing to have, talk about health and well-being, but it really comes to the leaders to bring that to life. So when the leaders bring that to life, whether the leader does or doesn't, what advice do you have for associates or employees to ask questions about when they're not maybe experiencing the right, whether it's environment or if they're dealing with health and well-being issues? I mean, so many issues are so personal, and so many companies, unfortunately, have just basically said, when you come in to your earlier point, check your emotions at the door, leave your personal life at home. But that's not the reality of what people are experiencing, because we're all experiencing something at home, and what we experience outside of work, it's going to impact us regardless. So not every situation is the same, but any advice for how employees can really bring these sensitive topics up? Because if they don't get the help that they need, or they often just quit. And then we make up stories on why they quit, or why all of a sudden they were a bad performer, or what have you. But at the end, when we think about humanity, we have a responsibility to help people in society. So leaders can do this to create the conditions, but what advice do you have for employees to talk about these types of topics?
It's such a great question, and it's so true. I mean, what happens at home happens at work, and vice versa, right? Like, we don't we don't have a work self and a life self. I know some people believe that we do.
I know.
But we don't. And to your point, in the book, I actually do share a story where I had, I was a first time manager, and I had somebody that came and sat down with me and told me that she was leaving my team, and she told me all of the reasons why. And unfortunately, at the time, it was probably a normal human reaction, but I got defensive, right? I made up all these stories about why she was leaving the team. It wasn't until, a couple of 18 months later that I kind of had the realization of, like, you know what, she was right, and I wouldn't want to work for me either. And I mean, that conversation that she had with me significantly changed me as a leader. And I reached back out to her at the time, and I told her, hey,
that's great.
It took me 18 months. I get it. I'm a slow learner, but at least I got there. So what can employees do? Look,
That's great.
If you're experiencing a health or well-being challenge, you never, ever have to disclose the details of the challenge if you don't want to. Some people have different comfort levels with that. I'm a cancer survivor, so I talk often about my experience of, cancer and going through treatment and being in the workplace and all of that. But you never have to ever, like, no one should ever feel like they have to disclose anything, that, especially their private health information. That's the first thing. So, but you do have to have a little bit of courage if you're uncomfortable having that conversation. And so I think there's a couple ways that you can do it. First, if you don't feel like the culture is exactly right, perhaps start by having a conversation with some of your colleagues and say, hey,
Mm,
this is something that I'm interested in. This is something that I'm interested in doing. What do you think? Do you have an interest in it? Do you have a different interest? Like, kind of, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Right. And then collectively, you could go to the leader, right, and say, hey, this is something that we've talked about, not in a way that you're ganging up on the leader, but this is something that we've
right.
talked about as a team that is really important to us, and we want to help you. So I think that the main piece,
Powerful.
whether you go to the leader as, by yourself or as a team, don't go to the leader with just a problem, right? Like, this is a problem. Go
Right.
to the leader with, like, this is what I see, this is what I'm passionate about, or this is what's going on, and this is what I think the solution is, right? And so help them solve it. Leaders, all of us are busy. None of us are mind readers.
Right.
We talk about boundaries, and boundaries in the workplace is, most of the time when people overrun your boundaries, it's not because they're bad people. It's because you
Right.
communicated the boundary, or you didn't respect the boundary yourself, right? Like, somebody asked you to do something at a time that you have something going on in your personal life. And instead of saying, hey, you know what, that time doesn't work for me, but I can do it these 4 other times, we just say, okay. and then we get
Right.
and then we get frustrated, and it starts to spill out in other places, in other ways, usually at home. We
Right.
get frustrated with the people that we care most about, right? Instead of just
Right.
like, hey, it doesn't work for me, right? Can we find a different way to do it? And that takes a little bit of courage, but once you've done it a couple times, you kind of have to practice that, that courage muscle a little bit, and you will feel much better, and you will have done your part to kind of create the culture that you want to create.
I love that. There's so many great nuggets in that one. A couple things I wanted to unpack was it's what you said towards the beginning of the individual almost doesn't understand how much power that they have, and how much influence they can make. So I love the advice on talk to your colleagues, because if you're part of a team and not experiencing it, probably most likely everyone else is having the same experience.
Yeah.
And when you come with not the problem but the solution, you're actually working on creating culture for all of your peers that you're experiencing. You're helping the leader understand better, to use empathy, then to create the conditions for the team to be successful. So I think that's powerful. I think those are great advice.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you.
Guys, awesome. Love it. All right, so you've given leaders tips on what they can do to role model. Love it. As an individual, here's what you can do to understand how to create the conditions and work with colleagues and help your leader create the right conditions. Thinking about going back to work. It's interesting. So you've been writing, you were doing this book during the pandemic, and I guess we're still in it. But as we think about the hybrid workforce and going back to work, I would love to hear about maybe some things that what's on your mind around that. But more specifically, what's been a bit frustrating for me is this reconciliation, that I'll call it, of what people are saying they're wanting or expecting in terms of, we expect a hybrid workforce, or we expect hybrid options, and we don't expect it'll be 100% back in the office. And yet so many of these businesses and CEOs are declaring that everyone's going to be back in the office. So it seems to me there's this odd reconciliation of people speaking on behalf of everybody, but not really listening to the conversation that's happening in society. So it feels a bit problematic. So I guess the two questions are, what are your thoughts around how businesses may be disconnected from where people are, or I'm sorry, what people are truly expecting in the return to work? And then any advice on, as we return to work, how do we incorporate our health and well-being into a hybrid workforce?
Yeah. So, in terms of the disconnect, I think it's a bit of a reflection of human nature, right? Like, we're all just in a different place on this spectrum in terms of our comfort level, our desire. I mean, there are people that have really struggled through the pandemic, working remotely, working from home, and really truly like just thrive in an office environment. On
Hmm.
the other end of the spectrum, there are people that are like, I'm killing it with this like remote work and work from home thing. And then there's the people in the middle that are like, I kind of want a little bit of both, right? And so I think some of the decisions that are being made out of, you're right, kind of out of a personal preference, or perhaps a reflection of the experience that people had during the pandemic. For us at Deloitte, I mean, one of the biggest things that we do is we're constantly trying to understand through surveys and other ways what employee sentiment is.
Mm,
What do our employees want? How do
right.
they feel about, and it's interesting because there's a pretty decent split, right? And so I think that does lead you ultimately to a decision around a hybrid workplace. And I think what we've learned during the pandemic, I mean, it's interesting because right before the pandemic, Deloitte did an external marketplace survey about flexible work. And the number
Oh,
that came out of that was that most organizations allow people flexible work. They had that available as a benefit, but people didn't take advantage of it because they were afraid of the stigma associated with flexible work, right? And kind of not being in the office. And then, we kind of went into this for the majority of us, we went into this, this mode where we were all working virtually. So we kind
right.
of, okay, well, and what we learned through that is that, like, oh, by the way, we can be really productive while we're working virtually. As in
Right.
fact, we're probably overproductive.
We need better boundaries at
We were
times, right?
towards burnout. And I also think that there are some leaders that believe getting people back into the office and kind of, creating structure in people's day of going back to the office, getting to the office signals a start to the workday, leaving the office signals an end to the workday. And some people need that, right? And so I
Hmm.
think for some leaders, I don't think their intentions are bad. I think maybe they believe that that's kind of a solve for the burnout that many of us, or, kind of the Zoom fatigue or the virtual fatigue
Right.
people have been experiencing. I don't know the answer. I don't think anybody knows the answer. I think what we need moving into whatever is next for all of us is a little bit more compassion, a little bit more kindness, a little bit more listening and understanding, right? And allowing people to kind of be human in the workplace, and allowing people to choose, right? If you hire professionals to do a job and they're doing their job regardless of where they are doing it from, you know, then they're doing their job, right? And so,
Right.
I think we need to give the workforce a little, we need to create cultures of trust and autonomy. That's what the workforce is telling us that they want.
Well,
And
that's powerful.
I think that the organizations that listen to their workforce are going to be the ones that thrive in the future. Now, I'm not going to predict who's right and who's wrong. I have no idea. I don't think we've never done this before, right? And so we're kind of
No.
moving into the next big global experiment around this. And so,
Right.
but I think we need to go in it with more compassion, listening more, being kind, trying to understand that everybody has a different comfort level,
Right.
depending on what their experience is from the pandemic. I mean, many people lost loved ones. I mean, there's a
Right.
lot that happened, and there's a
Right.
lot going on from a mental health perspective that we need to be compassionate about and be aware of.
Well, that's powerful. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think one of the big takeaways I had from what you just shared is listening to what, and having the conversations, and understanding that we're all experiencing something different and unique. Because if we really develop those habits around talking with our people, having conversations, listening to what they're asking for, what the marketplace is saying, and having that dialogue on what can or cannot happen is incredibly important. Like, we have a lot of associates that work at a corporate office, so that looks differently than
Yeah.
the 1,050 hospitals that we have
Many
across the
of
U.S.
their frontline workers, right? And we are
Right,
to them, and we appreciate all that they've done for us and our pets during this entire pandemic, because they didn't have the choice, right? Like
right.
they signed up to do and be, and that's what they love, and we need to show our gratitude for that.
Absolutely. And what they're experiencing looks differently. And it doesn't mean that health and well-being and showing up in the workplace is any less important. And we're just seeing too many headlines out there about women leaving the workforce at a faster rate, and not engaging with our people is not acceptable, because you said it a couple of times now. It is about humanity, and being part of that conversation is so important.
Well,
So
you know,
thank.
the foundation for great relationships is communication.
Absolutely, and it works so brilliantly in so many ways when we can do it. So I love it. Listening, kindness, and compassion. Well done. All right, I want to shift gears. So talking more about health and well-being, I have two final questions for you. First one is really around like your like rituals, if you will, like in the workplace. So I know the workplace has changed, but like what is it that you do on a daily basis that's focused on your health and well-being? So I'd love to hear what you're doing, and maybe that give us some tips to learn
Yeah,
from.
absolutely. So I'm pretty intentional about designing my day. If anybody takes a peek at my calendar, they will actually see that I use my calendar for everything. I have my meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, two snacks, bedtime. I mean, anything that I'm going to do in a day, any of my rituals, they're in my calendar for anybody
Yes,
calendar to see. So
that's great.
I don't eat meals in front of with electronic devices. I
Mm,
carve out the time to actually eat and eat mindfully. I don't roll out of bed in the morning and check my email, because that, you could read something that kind of dictates the tone and the trend for your entire day. But I allow myself,
right.
wake up. I have a gratitude practice in the morning.
Mm,
Sometimes the gratitude practice ends up being at night. I have a pretty strict ritual around bedtime and sleep. I'm
ooh,
a huge advocate for sleep. I mean, if you are going to do one thing for your health and well-being, it is, get more sleep. I think we are all perpetually sleep deprived. And so I don't mess around with my sleep. No electronic devices, turning the lights down, reading good old fashioned hard copy books,
love it.
taking a hot warm bath, those types of things, but at least an hour to an hour and a half before bed, I am kind of getting into full on, like, it's time to go to sleep mode. And so I have some pretty strict and kind of strong rituals. As a matter of fact, when we used to travel for work, because I have the best team, not only did they tell me that I can't check email on vacation, they always tell me what time it is and that I need to go to bed, because they know what it's like to work with a Jen that's not well rested. So they
I love it.
that
I
I go,
love the team accountability that you have. It's great.
yeah.
That's true. Those are great habits and rituals, and for me, I love music, and so I had to form new habits and rituals going from the office to home, and one of the ways for me to really disconnect is by just shutting the
Yeah,
laptop down and
right.
turning on music, and then
Yeah.
that's the opportunity for me to transition from work to personal time now, and so that's been a powerful one.
I don't know why I forgot this, but Fiona, my dog, we go on a walk every single morning,
Uh,
45-minute walk. That's part of our morning ritual. So
I love it. Well, that was going to be my last question. So at Banfield, we have over 19,000. Speaking of pets, my little
oh,
my
give me
little guy just ran through the screen. He loves to run through the camera here.
here you go. Everybody can meet Fiona.
Yes, Fiona. How are you, Fiona? I love it.
I just woke her up from her nap. So she's like, "What are you doing?"
What's happening? It's funny during this world of Microsoft Teams calls and everything. Every time someone's dog would bark, that would talk from. If I was talking to someone outside of the organization, I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, my dog barked." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I'm at a pet hospital. It's not a meeting
We
if
need to
we're not
stop
seeing."
apologizing for those things.
Exactly, right? It's kind of fun how to see that. So that's awesome. So are you okay? So you said you take Fiona for a walk every morning, but so being at home versus the office, what kind of fun habits, rituals have you and Fiona created? So this is the final question.
Fiona usually has a lot of energy and does not like to be ignored.
That's awesome.
So you will usually, she's not a barker, but she does squeak her toys in the background. And one of her favorite
Oh,
things
that's
to do,
great.
if you're not paying attention to you, she will nip at your heels to make you pay attention to her.
I
Uh,
love it.
we go on our morning walks. She loves that we cuddle every single night, before bed. And the thing, look, all pets of any kind are emotional support animals. Like, they are just, you can't have a bad day when there's a
Nope.
pet around, because, you know, I'll be in a bad mood and she will for sure do something silly or ridiculous that like you kind of like makes you pause in that moment and be like, okay, why am I, you know, what like
Exactly.
what really matters in life, right?
Exactly. No, they're constant reminders of that. And our office is pet friendly. So on a given day, we have over 100 dogs in the office. And to your exact point, I'll never forget. It's hard to, even if the meeting it didn't go as planned, you walk out and you see like a little puppy sitting at someone's desk, wagging its tail. It's like, life is good.
and
Life is good.
and I think during the pandemic too, it was like, you know, I mean, she still had to go for her walks. She had no idea that there was a global pandemic going on. So she's, you know, she's out there, she's looking at nature, and we live in Miami, so she's chasing lizards and, you know, and it's just kind of a reminder of like, yeah, you know, there's a lot that's tough going on in the world, but like if you kind of see the world through your pet's eyes or perhaps your kid's eyes, you know, you remember that there's still a lot to be grateful for. And so I think for me, that's what she kind of reminds me of every single day.
That is awesome. Well, that's the human animal bond in action there, and we're so glad to hear that. Yeah, my two cats, Ashton and Kenji, these cats are out of control, but what they've meant to me over the last year and a half has been unbelievable. Getting the glimpse into what they do, like when I was at the office, at first was a little frightening, I'll be honest with you, but they conditioned me. They trained me
I
pretty
saw
well.
the
So
video of one of them jumping in the box and then not knowing how to get out.
yeah, it was like unbelievable. And so at first I quickly run and get him out of the box, and then I set him up. Then he jumps back onto the counter and jumps back in the box. I'm like, you know what, you're on your own. But eventually he figured it out. So, you know,
Yeah.
hey, what do I know? They're out of control, but they are awesome. Pets mean the world to us. So that's great. Well, Jen, thank you so much for this conversation today. So for everyone, Work Better Together is coming out June 29th. She's got her first hard copy, and we need everyone to go get their hard copy. What's so cool about this book is it is beyond what everyone thinks. It talks really about the importance of relationship. Yes, sleep's important, and eating well and exercising. All those things are important cornerstones. But workplace relationships are so important. And Jen, thank you for the advice on how our leaders can be vulnerable and really role model and cast the right shadow. And I still love how each individual, no matter what you're experiencing, find those that you're close to, find your Q10, expand those relationships, talk to your colleagues and ask, this is what I'm experiencing, what are we experiencing, what do we need to do as a team, and help your leaders. That's truly mutuality around how we all can be in this together, because it is about humanity. It's about creating the conditions. It's not about saying workplace safety and health and well-being is important. It's about doing something about it. So I'm so thankful for our health and well-being team and all the things that we're doing. But it only happens when our leaders role model the right behaviors and our associates take care of all those benefits, take advantage of all of them, and continue to give us feedback. So it's all about having the conversation. So let's keep the conversation going. Jen, thank you so much. Good luck in the book.
Thank you.
Awesome job.
Great conversation. Thanks for having
We
me today.
appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.